Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, and welcome to episode 4 of our Star Wars month. I'm Chris Garner, joined by my co-hosts Tayte in the Hour and George Aldridge, as we review and discuss everything involving our favourite galaxy far, far away. We're 5 days away now, I think, from the release of The Force Awakens as of this recording, and we're celebrating the release of a brand new Star Wars film by devoting the entire month of December to the Star Wars saga. On our last episode, we concluded our reviews of the prequels with Revenge of the Sith, and on today's show, we'll be beginning our journey into the Star Wars original trilogy, so we're finally getting to the good ones, starting with the 1977 original Star Wars, or as it was later titled, Episode 4, A New Hope. Once again, directed and written by George Lucas, to a much more successful standard, I think, this time. I think we can all agree. So, this one might be a bit different because I know me and you, George, this was not the first Star Wars film we saw. We said in our Phantom Menace one, that was the prequels as sort of our entry into the Star Wars series. But Tate, this was what you started with. So
yeah,
if you can remember the first time you saw this movie and about like how old you were when you first watched it?
I was around 4, 5, and the first thing that I remember seeing from Star Wars was the opening scene of the two ships going across the screen, and I was just like, wow, what have I stumbled upon? And like, it was just magical back then. Just trying to remember like watching Star Wars for the first time. It's an interesting experience, I have to say. I was just blown away by it. Like, I thought it was the best film. It was immediately my favourite film, up there with Toy Story. I think Toy Story 2 I preferred over Toy Story 1 at the time. But yeah, like, I was just blown over by it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm trying to think, like, my parents went to see it in the cinema when it originally came out in 1977, and they all refer to that opening scene with the rebel ship going over and then the Star Destroyer that just keeps going on and on and on. And if anyone's seen Spaceballs, they do a great joke with that, where it's like the first 5 minutes of the movie is literally just a ship just constantly driving past. But I'm trying to think of like other sci-fi things that would have come out before this. I know that the original Star Trek series came out in the mid to late 60s. But anything on this scale, now I don't want to get into like a huge debate of what's better, Star Trek or Star Wars, because I'll probably be like hunted down and murdered by some angry Trekkie. But just that opening shot, and I think the music again plays such a huge part in it with John Williams. That opening score with the title crawl, and then when the camera pans down and Star Destroyer goes over, it just immediately pulls you into this brand new world. And I think that a brand new viewer, they would have just been just like, as you were, Tate, just like, what the hell is this movie?
George, you haven't spoken yet.
I know.
Yeah.
It's hard with this because the way I saw it, I've got one of the best orders. It's the order everyone my age. The order most people I know saw Star Wars was 1, 4, 5, 6, 2, then 3.
Yeah.
And I don't ever remember seeing it for the first time. What I do remember is my uncle giving me a load of his old Kenner toys and 3 videos. Those videos being the 1991 widescreens, which I played to death when I was younger. He probably played to death when he had them before I was born. And I just can't ever remember seeing 4, 5 or 6 for the first time. It's such a shame, because I can remember bits of 1, 2 and 3. But it would have been as soon as I, saw episode 1, I was obviously shown them, then eventually I got them all. But it's really cool because with the special editions, which we'll go into later, I love the fact that I have the best possible home release of the originals, because let's be honest, before, I'm going really techie 90s here, widescreen was such a brand new concept where most videos were 4 to 3, so it's almost brand new in the best way you can technically watch it, unless Disney eventually release it. But it's such a shame because I can't remember it, because whenever I watch it now, the opening shot is kind of like, this is pretty cool, but I never had the wow, and I'm sure I probably did wow back then, but it's such a shame I can't remember it.
Yeah, and I think I watched the movies in the same order as you, George. Phantom Menace was definitely my first one. I think I may have had some of like the original trilogy toys. I remember specifically having I think they were stamps. They had like a figure on top of a stamp, and you had a little stamp pad, and it did like a little picture of the character when you pressed it on paper. I remember having those original trilogy characters. I think probably around the same time I saw Phantom Menace, and obviously I didn't know who any of the characters were. Like, who's this Darth Vader guy? Who's this Princess Leia? But then I think I was like you, like everything, it was all just Star Wars to me. Phantom Menace, and then moving on to this one, it was just like a logical step into the next film. There was no sort of groundbreaking, this is where it all started kind of feeling with me, which is a shame because, like, as I say, like, that opening shot would have just been immense and a great introduction to all these characters. But so the plot in this one, this is obviously Luke Skywalker's journey, and the film is almost sort of charming in its own simplicity, really. I will say this, it is probably my least favourite one of the original trilogy, but that's no slight against the film because I rewatched it and it still holds up. The effects in it are great, and some of the, well, just the banter between the characters is fantastic. This was George Lucas's writing at its finest. I know, George, you know a lot more about sort of behind the scenes of this film than me. You wrote some essay papers on it and stuff. But I know that he went through loads and loads of drafts of this script, and I think he probably had help from a lot of people on the outside. A lot of things changed, like Han Solo was originally going to be like a green alien, I think I've heard, and C-3PO was going to talk like a used car salesman. So there you can sort of see like the alarm bells ringing of what if George Lucas had have had complete creative control over this film with no collaboration from anyone.
Yeah, and it's a shame because the story is he wanted to do Flash Gordon, the rights had already been taken away from him. So thank God someone bought them rights, because Flash Gordon's cool, but he's no Star Wars, he never could be. So it's awesome to a degree that Lucas was given this, but in a way there's a lot of luck involved, you know. He just turned down doing Apocalypse Now so he could do Star Wars. I mean, seriously, if he did an Apocalypse Now, that would probably be very different, but so would his career. So there's a lot of credit to him, but the way I've always seen it, he's the brains behind it, and he still did a lot of it, but he did have help. But that's why it's successful, because you have to have help. You can't single-handedly do anything of this caliber, especially for cinema. I mean, they can talk about some things. Some people can argue, this is not really controversial, it's a bit odd. You can argue, Schindler's List is the greatest film of all time, but without the real life stuff, that's not going to be a film. To a degree, Spielberg had help based off source material. So it's one of them where naturally it's just needed in every film. The problem, again, looking back at the prequels, was that he surrounded himself by yes men. Whereas in this, in episode 4, you had Harrison Ford and Unknown was still challenging George Lucas on set. I think the famous quote is, "You can write this shit, but you can't say it on screen." And I think that's the quote. So it's kind of bizarre how it came out, but the way it came out compared to some of the earlier scripts, it's mesmerising, the differences. The dark side was called jargon or something like that. No, sorry, bogan. It just seemed like a mess when you read it, but the final product, there's always script changes, but it's just awesome, and I can go into so many more details. I'll do a few later on, but the production of this would still make one of the best films I've ever seen if they try and do it.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I mean, Star Wars for me was now is just groundbreaking. I was talking to one of my friends yesterday who was arguing that 2001: A Space Odyssey was a dumb film, and I did his arguments were agreeable with, but I did say to him, it's artwork. I mean, you can't really try and critique something which is being considered a work of art. And he was saying, well, the plot's dumb and stuff like that. And it could very easily be applied to the same for Star Wars. I mean, if you read the Star Wars plot out, you think, what is that person on? If you're trying to explain it to someone who'd never seen Star Wars before and you explained it exactly how the film went. But, it's a work of art. I mean, this film and the franchise that it has created is just beautiful. And knowing that this was its beginnings, it started off goddamn well. I'm not sure how much it took, but I can only assume it made back way more. Yeah, budget 11 million, box office 775 million. I mean,
it went way over budget though, didn't it?
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of loans. Again, talking about collaboration, Gary Kurtz seriously helped George Lucas got him more loans, paid off luckily.
Films don't even do that amount of money nowadays, do they?
Exactly. I mean, some of that was the 97 re-release, but still, I think, back then, 500, 600. I know at the time of release, it was the highest grossing film of all time until E.T. A few years after. No idea how E.T. made that much money. That's just insane.
Spielberg, that's why.
Yeah. And Star Wars references galore. But looking at Star Wars, I know in the other podcast we spoke about how our opinions have changed, and I can't really, my opinions never changed on this. I love it. But the one thing I've always said about the whole saga itself was, the older I've got, I've loved the films the same, but it's the respects and seeing everything that followed it. So even to the degree we can talk about how poor Episode 1 is and how horrific Jar Jar Binks is, but the fact that he was the first motion capture character. And that's what I love at this age, where they're still my favourite films of all time, but I respect them so much more. And I think that's really cool, like as a film fan and a Star Wars fan, that they've done so much since that, and it's just something that everyone should be grateful for.
Just a quick thing.
Yeah.
The original Star Wars is the second highest grossing film of all time if adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gone with the Wind's dominating still. I don't think that'll ever get caught, to be fair, but I love that Star Wars is second. It's brilliant.
Do you reckon?
And we have to.
Oh, God.
Sorry, Karen.
No, go on. Sorry. I was just going to say, we have to say as well that this Star Wars film, when it was first made, was just intended to be just like a one-off. It was just George Lucas going, I want to make a space movie. And, you know, he made it. He was in that real desert with all the props and stuff, and you can see in the behind the scenes everything was going wrong. Costumes were really difficult to work with, the big creatures and the puppets and things like that. I think even Alec Guinness, who we'll get onto later, Obi-Wan, he hated it. He thought the material was crap. He hated it, and everyone was like looking at the production going, this isn't going to take off. This is just going to be like a dumb space movie. It's going to flop. And then you look at it now, it's so ingrained into pop culture, and that book that came out, How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, that really just highlights it the best, where it's like you could go up to someone who's never seen Star Wars in their life, any of the movies, and you'll show them a picture of Darth Vader, they'll know who Darth Vader is. You'll show them a picture, the Millennium Falcon, and they'll know it's from Star Wars or a Stormtrooper. And I think that's fascinating that Star Wars has that going for it.
Yeah, and again, it's a film that has the biggest spoiler in film history, and everyone in the world knows it that's never seen it.
Yeah.
It's just incredible, but again, that's just, you know, what it's done, it's massive. But going into especially the release of it, they didn't release it on many screens. The first wave, you've seen the pictures of people queuing at cinemas, because the board didn't have a lot of faith, especially in the rough cut. Obviously, eventually they put the CG in and they were mesmerised, but it started off with a few screens, and then they realised what they've stumbled across, then it was everywhere. And there's a famous memo that's gone viral, I've forgotten the name, my lecturer sent it to me. One of the producers, it's not Gary Kurtz, it's someone else, wrote a 5-page memo to the board at Fox saying, you have to put this everywhere, this is the biggest thing that's ever been made, this will be bigger than Jaws. Obviously at the time Jaws was the highest grossing, bigger than The Godfather. And this is fascinating because this is 1976 this memo comes out, and I'll show you guys later on, but it's incredible that the fact there was some faith, some people could see what's happening, but again it was so diverse in the sense that not a lot of people thought it was going to work. And fair play for George Lucas carrying on. I know he had a heart attack in the process, but the whole cycle of everything that happened, I think he trademarked it in 1971, the phrase Star Wars, and it's 6 years to transition onto the screens.
Well, something I have to quickly say, like, wasn't it the first considered blockbuster, or was that Jaws?
Jaws.
Jaws.
I think.
Jaws.
Yeah.
I feel like.
I'm gonna.
Well, go on.
I'm gonna quote my lecturer because he helped on the thing. He's a hero. The phrase he uses is, "The Godfather knocked on the door, Jaws opened the door, and Star Wars kicked the door down." Because Jaws made a lot of money. I think it was about 400, 500. That was the first summer release.
Yeah.
But no one had really clocked on. But Star Wars just decimated it. Even Godfather, to a degree, that made about 200, 300 mil, and that was 1972. So there's 3 key films involved in that. But yeah, I'd say the term blockbuster is popularised with Star Wars, and obviously had the May release date. The following 5 have had it, and eventually Lucasfilm are reverting back to it for Episode 8.
But what I think the real strength of this film is that, I mean, George Lucas, yes, did something completely different with it, something we'd never seen before, and now, I mean, even, 30, 40 years after it came out? It's still going strong. We've got new movies, new spin-offs. It's going probably stronger than it ever was before. At its core, it is a simple, almost fairy tale movie. It's the story of the unlikely hero rescuing a princess from an evil villain, and that's what it is at its core. And I think that unlike the other two, this one is the most simplest of them, but I don't think that's a bad thing about it. It is a very self-contained story as it was originally intended. I know the film leaves a lot of things open-ended, like Jabba the Hutt's referred to it in the film, and at that point we hadn't seen him. They added him back in later in the special edition, and like Vader gets away at the end. Like they could have very easily have just killed Vader at the end of this, sort of like Darth Mauled him, and can you imagine what that would have done for the rest of the trilogy if they'd have done that? But so even though it was originally just tended to be standalone, there are a lot of things could carry on, and obviously it did into one of the greatest trilogies ever made, if not the best. But I love the simplicity about it, and I watched it the other day, and it still works. It was a tried and tested formula. It had been done to death, but I think where you can have a story that's been done to death before, but what George Lucas and the whole crew was meant to what they did was they took it in a completely different direction that no one had ever seen before on the big screen, and it just blew everyone away. And you know, Star Wars is here to stay, and we'll probably be getting a Star Wars film every year now for the rest of the time I have on this planet, most likely, until people get sick of it. But I think it's a thing that I don't know if people ever will get sick of it.
I think there is a limit. There is always a limit. I know that they've got such a huge universe to play with. But like, how long's Doctor Who been going on for? And some people are getting sick of it. That's because they're trying to change the writing to keep it fresh, and they have to because the characters get older, the stories get older, and there is only a certain amount of times you can repeat the same formula without people getting tired of it. And I'm pretty sure that's what comes with like the Fast and Furious franchise right now, which has just become. They tried to change it from car film to heist film, and now I don't even know what it is anymore. And I'm pretty sure that Star Wars will head in that direction with the more sequels that come out after the new ones that they are doing in the extended universe. However, the simple format, the fact that this was Star Wars, big bold title, and it was just a film. It was just an amazing film. There was no grandeur of sequels or anything. It was very closed, open and closed, kept it brilliant. They left open this tiny option for a sequel with Darth Vader living at the end of it. But it wasn't like a completely like open door. Like, they could have very easily just ended it there, and then people could speculate in the future, oh, was Darth Vader alive or not? Will there ever be a sequel? But yeah, it just spawned an amazing franchise, and sure, the stories will someday dry out, like, but then people can always go back to this film and the films that they've brought out since then, and people will be like, yeah, brilliant franchise.
Exactly, and going off onto the sequels, if they overdo it, the key with Star Wars is that there is thousands of years of mythology. Disney have got to do something well with it. They can easily cock it up. They can milk it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, obviously we're getting 7, 8, 9 in the first load of spin-offs. They've got to be very careful what they do post. I think the Boba Fett spin-off after episode 9 they're talking about. That's when they've got to be clever, because there's talk of an Obi-Wan trilogy. That's cool, but he doesn't need a trilogy. That's overdoing it. Go back a few hundred years to the Rise of the Sith. That's something that could be different. They need to keep it fresh, because Marvel's going down the same route. They're twisting things. They're keeping some products fresh. I mean, the difference between Ant-Man to Iron Man to Guardians, there's so much variety there. Star Wars can do that. Obviously they can't have a comedy film out of it or an Oscar drama film out of it, but they need to keep things on track, which I hope they do. But there is a risk, and it will happen. It will happen to Marvel, it will happen to DC. There will be a turning point when it becomes too much, and I don't think they're dumb enough to ever do 3 films a year. But it would be amazing, I'll take it, but that's when it's going to get stale. Just make stuff that will work as a Star Wars film on screen, and people will love it. Because every single film that gets released, that's going to be someone's first Star Wars film. Talk to a lot of older people. Tons of people's first film was Return of the Jedi at the cinema. Tons was Episode 4. Tons was The Phantom Menace. Tons will be each of the 6. And now, we're going into a new generation where there's going to be millions and millions of people that see Episode 7 for the first time. So they need to be careful what they do, because it's something I don't want to become stale. You know, I've got my complete saga box set, and I love the fact there was just 6 films. I say to myself, yeah, it's great that there's an episode 7 because it finishes so nice. But now I feel like an idiot because I'm so excited for episode 7. I always really wanted episode 7 in my head. But it's something that keep it fresh and keep it tied to Star Wars, and they're going to be fine for the future. But again, it all comes down to this, and George Lucas he kind of planned a world. He knew he could do more, but he didn't sit there thinking, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have a mid-credit scene, so you all want to come back eventually. He just did the film that he thought he could do, and he did, and that's fair play. And then he got it further and further with 5 and 6, and there's so much respect to have for him. It's such a shame with the prequels because, it's so easy to forget what he's done, and it's just such a shame. But there's two halves to everything.
Yeah, and with Star Wars, it's weird because you were talking about like mid-credit scenes there. Even with just the 6 films we've had, there's such a formula to even the very credits of the film. Like, I know we're going to get a title crawl, obviously, as we always do with the fanfare, but it's got us thinking, like, with these spin-offs, will they do the opening credits in all the spin-off films as well, or will it go straight into the movie? Will they just save the opening crawls for, like, the episode films? And, like, the uproar that there's not going to be the 20th Century Fox logo at the front, and even I'm sort of in that area. I know it makes sense now because Disney own the rights, but to me, even down to the very 20th Century Fox opening, which is used in thousands of films, it's not exclusive to Star Wars, but to me that's so... When I hear that fanfare, I always expect it to go into Lucasfilm, a long time ago in the galaxy far, far away, and it's the same with the credits as well, like the abrupt cut to the credits with the music, and then it just ends. There's no mid-credit scene, after-credit scene, so I hope they don't.
There won't be an end-credit scene, by the way.
They've confirmed it. Good.
Yeah. And I hope they keep it that way, but it all depends. Like, we've got Kathleen Kennedy sort of overseeing the whole projects now, and I think she's... Well, I haven't seen episode 7 yet, obviously, but it looks like she's got, her head screwed on right. She knows exactly what fans want, and she's going to do her damnedest to get that. But when we have new directors coming onto it, like Colin Trevorrow doing episode 9, will he make it look the same as JJ has? Because he's been a big proponent in using actual film to use props, sets, things like that. But will he? Maybe he'll want to do a lot more digital. So I think it's going to sort of be all over the place, but I hope they do sort of keep one consistent vision with it, like George Lucas did with the original Star Wars, and then when the new directors came on board. I think George Lucas was a producer on Empire and Return of the Jedi, wasn't he? And there's some rumours that he more or less directed Return of the Jedi as well. I hope there's some kind of through line through all these new ones coming out.
He basically did 5 and 6. More or less, I'd say 5 was the help of Lawrence Kasdan and Lee Brackett. 6 was mainly Lucas and Kasdan, I'd say. It was George's story, he just wouldn't direct it. Whereas episode 1, again, goes to the prequels, that's him having too much power and the lack of collaboration with a Kasdan, with a Kirshner. And I think this new trilogy, I think it's really JJ and Kathleen Kennedy's trilogy. I think Rian Johnson's probably going to have a lot of input, in all honesty, because obviously episode 8's fresh, it's being filmed now, but I think Colin Trevorrow, he's there to finish what they're starting. And fair play, if she's CEO of Lucasfilm, she can do what she wants.
Yeah.
But I think the whole story's set for what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, we go back to this film. Star Wars, obviously huge success, but George Lucas was still kicked off the project. I think that they say that didn't he have some kind of arguments with the studio maybe, and that because it went massively over budget they didn't want to chance it and bring him back for the second one, which seems ludicrous considering how much the film made and how well it was received. But I don't want to talk about it too much because we'll be talking about that in our Empire Strikes Back review, but when we get to Irving Kershner with the second one, you can definitely tell that there's a change in direction, style to it. The original Star Wars, again, not a bad thing about it. I love the movie to death, but you can definitely sort of see it's very much played out scene, cut to the next scene, cut to the next scene. It's very much like actors, it's almost like a theatre play, like you watch the actors on screen, they do what they have to, and then it will fade into the next scene or whatever like that. There's no sort of... To me, Empire and Return of the Jedi feel like much more complete movies. I don't know if you two feel that way. I think this one, when you watch it again, it does get quite slow in places. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I hate this movie. I really don't. It's one of my favourite films of all time. But I do think that Empire and Return of the Jedi are much stronger films overall when you compare it back to this one.
Yeah, look... My favourite film of all time is Gattaca, and even I could say Gattaca, it's got flaws, every film has flaws. Even like The Godfather had some things going against it. So even if it does have some things which, like, it's slow, it drags on slightly, that isn't the point. Did you enjoy the film?
Yeah.
Then it's
That's
a good
what it's
film.
all about. Then
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I love Michael Bay.
Oh no!
You just lowered
There's a
the whole
line.
tone.
I
there,
know.
George.
I know. So everyone just like turned off their computers and angered me.
We just dropped like 20
I just dropped the mic. I'm gonna go home now.
Oh, can you imagine Michael Bay doing a Star Wars film?
Oh.
Yes.
Like Star Wars spin-off. Which one do you think he'd do? Do you think he'd take on a character or like
droids.
it's like an incident?
He'd do droids.
Droids.
Transformers.
Oh, that's a good
crossover,
point, yeah.
R2-D2,
Beautiful.
C-3PO with explosion.
Beautiful.
He'll team up with George Lucas and bring back the racist robots from Revenge of the Fallen.
He'd probably just like destroy. He'd probably just like nuke the Gun-Guns, and then he'd become like, he'd become a cool hero. That's the only way he'll ever come back. I just had
I'd
to
love
drop
to
that.
see
Sorry.
that.
It was
Yeah,
it was an
um,
inspiring speech by Tayte.
But speaking about ruining things, let's talk about the special edition versions of these films
I
because
haven't watched any of them,
I've
and I'm glad of it.
haven't you?
No.
You haven't? Oh, you know of the scenes though that were changed, I'm assuming.
Actually, I don't. Go on.
Whoa.
I don't
Oh,
know.
okay. This is gonna be fun then. So I'm trying. Was it in the 90s where the special editions
Yeah.
first came out?
1997, 95 or 97 cinematic
I think it was 95. Yeah, and
What-
then they bought 97 ones out.
Basically, what happened? ILM they clocked on. Okay, we're going to do Star Wars. They've just peaked with Jurassic Park, so they're more or less doing it to test themselves. This is the gist I got from it, and they kind of came at Lucas. Lucas goes, I want to change a few things. They're like, okay. Then what I read was that Lucas had like 200 shots planned to change for the trilogy, but ILM said we can do this, we can do this, and we can do this. So they were like pressuring themselves, and it ended up being like 800 changes of shots. So that's adding in stuff for re-rendering, cleaning up wipes, anything. And it was some of it made sense to test themselves heading into doing CGI for episode 1, but there were some horrific changes which doesn't affect me as much as it does to a lot of people. But I completely understand why, and I'm sure if I grew up, well, technically I did grow up with them because I never saw any special edition till I got the DVD re-release, which was essentially Special Edition 2.0, followed by Blu-rays, which was more or less 3.0.
yeah.
But there were some very controversial changes.
I think there's been some rumours as well that the only reason these changes were made was so not to keep rights to Star Wars, but I don't know, wasn't it something they had to make certain changes to keep it fresh before they released another version or something like that?
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
I
true,
think-
but
I
there's
think-
been a lot of rumours sort of like that.
Back then they were a lot stricter on having cinematic re-releases, so I don't know the details, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some issue backstage for that. But a
Or
lot
maybe
of
it was done to build hype for Phantom Menace as well. Like you knew there was
Yeah.
going to get CGI in it, and this was like, look at what we can do now.
Yeah, it was all. The only reason they did it was, I think, ILM just to test themselves for the Phantom Menace. But basically, take the key ones. A lot of it you don't notice because, again, I said they cleaned a lot of transitions. They do make some of it look nicer, but like it doesn't get me as much as people. You know, when Han Solo just obliterates Greedo.
Yeah.
They have Greedo shoot first.
Oh.
A few frames before Han Solo.
Oh.
But it's done in a really weird way where it almost looks like they shoot at the same time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And like Han's head like awkwardly edits to the side to dodge the bullet,
I never
and the
noticed.
bullet hits the wall.
I just kind of thought that Greedo's the worst bounty hunter in the galaxy at that point.
Yeah, he's like right opposite it. Yeah, it doesn't hit. It's
But then,
and what George Lucas's reasoning for it was that he didn't want people to think that Han Solo was a cold-blooded killer.
But he
Murderer.
is. That's the whole point. He really doesn't care
Exactly.
at the start of the movie.
exactly.
Exactly, and that's what hardcore fans' argument is that that's his character arc. He's the rogue with a heart of gold who then, when you get to Return of the Jedi, has changed as a character, and that's his character arc over the 3 films. But George Lucas was like, no, he doesn't want kids to think that he's a horrible, nasty, bad guy, murderer person. So that's probably I would say that's the most infamous change to A New Hope that people talk about.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything new. There's lots of in
Spec-
the Mos Eisley spaceport. They add lots of
CGI.
CGI creatures walking past the screen. The scene where Obi-Wan mind tricks the stormtroopers and they go like, move along, move along. You get like a big green dinosaur thing walk directly in front of the camera. You get Jawas doing like shenanigans and weird stuff.
However, I will defend there is one change which is the greatest Easter egg in cinema history. Well, it's not Easter egg, sorry, more of a blooper. There's a famous clip of a stormtrooper hitting his head on a door.
Yes.
In the special editions, George Lucas added a sound effect of like a knock, so you can actually hear his head get smacked against it.
Oh no, I think I've seen the videos of that.
So that was kind of cool, but they added like a halo, I think, to when the Death Star gets blown up. They basically made the explosion look a bit cooler. Don't really mind
stuff
that.
like that I don't mind, because that does enhance it quite a lot, I think.
Then they I think the other dodgy one was they added in a deleted scene. So they filmed a scene with Jabba the Hutt in episode 4. At this point he's just a human. So they CGI'd a Jabba over the top.
And the original version was awful. Like the first 90s edition, it looks absolutely gross. It looks like worse than PlayStation 1 level cutscene graphics. And Han's interacting with this thing. They cleaned it up for the I want to say the 2004 DVD.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
sort of improved the textures on it a lot more, made it look like the one from Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
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 And then they also have Han Solo stepping on his tail, and they actually lift up Han Solo.
Yeah, there's a lot of unnecessary stuff like this. I know there's one change in each of the original trilogies that I do like. The one that I like in this was the deleted scene that was added in with Biggs. Luke meets up with him in the hangar before they go out to take on the first Death Star, so that, because they were childhood friends, and there was an even bigger deleted scene that was cut out in the original version of Star Wars. It's nice to see them have that interaction and catch up, and I think Biggs says like something like, "I'll tell you all about my stories when we get back," and obviously he doesn't make it through it. And I think watching it again the other day, the original version, because I've got the despecialized editions, I think they switch a reaction shot of Luke, because in the original version when Biggs dies he just doesn't care and he just sort of like flies on, but when like one random X-Wing pilot dies, like the general of them, he has this really like sad moment where he looks longing that his best friends died, and it plays this sad music. I think they switched that to the Biggs death to give that a bit more gravitas to his death. So I like stuff like that, but it's when you just have this pointless stuff added to it, and we'll get onto the other changes more when we get to Empire, and I think Empire's probably the least one that's touched. Yeah, that stuff sort of makes sense. A lot of stuff's put in that for like continuity between the prequels and that, but when we get to Jedi, oh boy, we'll get onto that. And even like the Blu-rays added a lot more stuff, but we'll get into all that. So positives I guess we could talk about. We've talked about a lot already, but are there any sort of key scenes that really stand out in your mind that you'd like to talk about? Have a discussion on that?
Key scene for me is the finale. I mean, just the whole like trench run and that entire scene. Like, I remember going to Disneyland when I was quite little and going on the trench run ride, and oh my god, it blew my mind.
See, the trench runs, I love that. I mean, going on to say going on what I said earlier about the sort of technical stuff I looked at, the CGI guy ILM John Dykstra invented the Dykstra cam for this film, which is incredible. Basically, it was almost the first computerized camera. So it followed their path and could do like speed and stuff. And the stuff they did for the trench run's incredible, and I love seeing it. And especially when you've seen images of actually how big that the set is they built for it, and the pressure it's on the old DVDs, on the special effects, and they were really behind schedule, and there's just videos of them just like blowing up X-Wings with like blue screens in the background, and I love that. But for me, whenever I think of episode 4, the bit I always like, especially as I've grown older, is the binary sunset moment.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's one of the best moments. It's odd because when I was younger I thought, oh, it's kind of cool, but I think appreciating the soundtrack more and everything that's going to come afterwards, it is just awesome. The whole build-up.
Yeah, the fact that there's no dialogue and that's it. It's a really short scene as well. I think it's like a matter of like 35 seconds or something like that. But that just shows you as well the power of John Williams' music. That's without a doubt my favourite bit of Star Wars music in that one scene. And I would go so far as to say it's one of the most iconic scenes in film history. Just everything about it. Just you get everything you need to know about Luke's character from that one scene, and it is perfectly done. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favourites. Other scenes you sort of have to talk about are the cantina scene. Phenomenal work on puppets and costumes and everything like that. It's still great to watch now, the level of imagination that went into all that. And that was your introduction to Han Solo, where Han Solo shot first, I think everyone will find.
Yep.
And also for me, when I rewatched it again, just the introduction to Darth Vader, where the music sort of builds. Now, you didn't get the Imperial March in this one. I always find that weird, like that came into it in Empire Strikes Back, but where the smoke clears, Vader walks through, the soundtrack cuts out, and you just hear his breathing. And right there, I mean, to me, it's probably the same with you. Without a doubt, for me, the best villain on screen we've ever had.
Yeah.
So iconic, and it's just beautifully captured in that one moment there. So I guess we could talk maybe about the characters a little bit now. I know we're sort of at 35 minutes, but so really for the main part, when you're sort of like thrown into this film, your main characters are C-3PO and R2-D2, and now since then they're sort of the ones that go through the story. They're there, they've seen it all, they've been in all 6 movies. But I think it was actually a really smart move to have these two start the movie. I mean, you follow them for quite a while, like the first 20 minutes maybe. It's not until they get to Tatooine that you actually meet Luke for the first time. And that was what a lot of the studios complained about in the initial cut, that they were saying, who is the main character of this film? It's Luke. Okay, why isn't he in it from the very start of the movie? And they had this scene where Luke's down on Tatooine with the binoculars looking up to space to the space battle happening, and it was going to keep cutting back down to the planet of Tatooine with Luke and his friends in the bar telling them to look up to the skies, there's a space battle going. That just would not have worked, and how they edited it and what we got was just definitely the perfect way to go with it.
I mean, I wouldn't have minded him looking up at the stars, but to be honest, like, that wouldn't have fitted in right, would it? I mean...
No, I think it makes sense to meet Luke when the droids meet him.
Yeah.
Yeah, following their path so you know when they intersect, rather than here's a protagonist, they're just going to cross paths. You know, it works so much better following. And that's the way it should be done, that's the way the better film's done. Would have been like, you know, sticking Lando in the start of episode 5, just some casual bloke on another planet. Wait till they're introduced and you've met them at the right time.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, sort of all the characters we talked about before. You've got Han and Leia, obviously. I want to say just Han, absolutely fantastic in this movie. The banter comes into it more with him and Leia in Empire, but it's still here in this. He gets one of my all-time favourite Star Wars moments, and I don't want to go into too many because I know we'll have a top 10 countdown eventually. But the bit where he shoots the intercom with boring conversation anyway, it's almost improv at how amazing that scene is. Was it? Was it improv? Yeah.
I'm sure I read, like, there was a bit of it, the chatting bit, then he just took it on himself and was like, fair play, because it's such an awesome moment. It's like, hey, how are you? And he just shoots it. No.
Boring conversation anyway.
Great, absolute legend.
And like with the improv, this is more for Empire though, but with the I love you scene, the I know, that was improv as well.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show that the collaboration you can have with the actors as well, where they can go, I don't like how this scene's written, I'm going to do my own thing here, and often is the case you capture absolute magic with it. Can we talk about Tarkin for a while? Because I've been waiting to talk about him. This is the only film I'm going to have a chance to talk about him in, really, because apart from his cameo at the end of Episode 3. Peter Cushing in this movie is amazing, and I know Darth Vader's sort of the main bad guy, but really Tarkin is Darth Vader's boss in this movie. Like, he gives him orders, like when he says Vader release him and Vader listens to him. Vader doesn't have to listen to him. He's just like an Imperial, he's a Grand Moff.
I feel
That's
like
all he
instead
is.
of a master, I would use the word ally. He has been with him for a long time. Like, they have known each other for probably the longest time. Usually with staff on the Death Star, I can only assume that, like, they don't stay there for too long. People usually have, like, a going-away party, you know, it's very casual on there. But he's been there from the very start, and I'm pretty sure that they have trust between each other. Therefore, he's happily say, look, Vader, you're going a little bit too far, mate. Do you want to just draw back a little? I mean, we got to keep this guy alive, you know? So...
And I don't know if Tarkin knows that Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker, but there's a pretty great, I think it's a double bill episode in the Clone Wars series where Anakin meets Tarkin, and you could already see there's sort of like an alliance building up between them. Both of them have very same ways of thinking and dealing with situations, and I thought that was a pretty neat episode, nice bit of foreshadowing to the original trilogy. But Peter Cushing's he was one of the best actors, and then just seeing him in this is fantastic. I think there was a little in-joke as well between him and Carrie Fisher on set, because I don't know if this is true, but apparently Peter Cushing smelled absolutely amazing on set. And then when Leia had to deliver the line, "I recognise your foul stench when I was brought on board," she couldn't keep a straight face because of how amazing he smelled all the time. So that's pretty cool. And then there's rumours that
He
they're
wears slippers.
yeah, because he couldn't wear the boots or something. He just found them really uncomfortable. So all of his shots is filmed from the waist up. And I think they've said that they're trying to recreate him in CGI, aren't they, for either Rogue One or one of the spin-offs?
Yeah, there was a rumour. I don't think it's true. I don't think you could motion capture someone like it works in Tron, but it gets outdated.
Yeah.
Ant-Man looks
Yeah.
great, but in 5 years it's going to look outdated. Don't do it. Just have Tarkin's name in passing, or
Yeah.
a sort of hologram
Yeah.
from him talking to someone. But don't balls it, because Rogue One, from what I'm hearing, it sounds awesome. A proper war film. Don't have some stupid moment like that. Just have the war film,
Yeah.
and have Tarkin chasing down whichever guy's going to be part of the Empire. You know, you can just picture a voice of Tarkin being like, "If you lose them plans, you're wrecked." And obviously, he wouldn't say it like that, but you could picture the scenario. But please don't motion capture.
Are you sure that he wouldn't go, "Mate, you're going to be wrecked if you miss any of those
It's like
plans"?
420 blazing. He like sends him to Alderaan on a retirement party and just blows up Alderaan.
Instead of the Star Wars theme, they have it completely in air horns.
Oh my god! I love YouTube. It's great.
But like with something like that, I don't even want them to use any of the villains from the from A New Hope. I know it happens right before it, but I want it to be able to stand on its own. But like you could have Vader in, I guess, as like a cameo, because I mean you could get anyone in the suit. And sort of the voice, you could get James Earl Jones back, or if you couldn't get him, I know there's a lot of voice actors that do the video game voices. And is Star Wars Rebels, is that still James Earl Jones doing the voice? Or
Yeah.
is that,
They use Vader very clever on that, which is fair play. He's made, I think, 2 or 3 appearances. But again, you can get James Earl Jones. He's doing it. He'd surely do it for another film.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it'd be great to see Vader on screen again. I guess I just want Rogue One to sort of be its own thing. So we've sort of talked a lot about, but there's so many positive things you could talk about that, and it's just about this film. It's just so iconic. Almost every single scene in is iconic. Whether it's just like a frame, you could just take literally just like freeze frame a shot from this movie, and already there people just immediately taken to that one scene. Whether it's the chasm swing with Leia and Luke, the cantina, the ending Tayte that you mentioned with the medal ceremony.
Oh,
just
we've
so many
completely
things.
forgotten about the trash compactor scene.
Oh
Yeah.
It's just like there are so many different scenes that you could just name off the top of your head, and
they're all iconic as well.
I know.
Yeah.
Even like Luke gets given a lightsaber and points it to his face. You know, one wrong button and there's no Star Wars anymore.
But that's it. Actually, let's talk about Luke a bit more now with Obi-Wan, because we do get that scene where Obi-Wan sort of talks about the whole history of the Jedi. First time the Clone Wars are mentioned. I guess that line originally was just meant to be sort of like a line of world building and mythology to what happened before. Since then, we now know what the Clone Wars are. Some of us maybe not exactly what we wanted from it, but it is what we got. There are a few irregularities now with things like your father wanted you to have this, when you were old enough. Well, no, he didn't. And there's a few other little side bits like that don't really quite make sense now with the prequels. But I think that, and this wasn't intentional, obviously, because this was done way before the prequels were even, constructed or even an idea. The way that Alec Guinness plays that scene, where Luke asks, "How did my father die?" and there's a split second, he looks like, I can't tell him the truth here, and he sort of looks away, and then he gives him this whole spiel about that Darth Vader killed his dad. That can't have been intentional, because they didn't have a trilogy planned at this time, but when you watch all three together, it just so works.
Yeah.
I think Lucas, from what I heard, as he was doing episode 4, he did a bit of world building. The phrase Clone Wars was banned from any person doing any expanded universe stuff, which is fair play. And the rumour is that when he did episode 4, he wrote a 2-line treatment for episodes 1, 2, 3, and 5 and 6. So I'm guessing in his head the whole time he probably had Vader as Luke's dad. But again, it's just a testimony. They either found a loophole or he's a genius. And I think it's a bit of both.
I mean, it's probably one of the cinema's best kept secrets. I mean, it not being like announced before the film actually came out. Because nowadays, like, we already know everything about almost every film except for this film, like the new film coming out. We don't really know much about this one. We can guess, but with films coming out nowadays, we know what the film is going to be about. We know who the bad guy is. We know all the relationships. Film twists are dying, I personally think. But with this, like with the ones that Star Wars have kept, I feel they've done a pretty good job with them.
Exactly.
Best twist of the year, M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit.
No, seriously, that is.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Is it better than Ex Machina?
No.
No. Not film-wise, twist-wise.
Twist and Ex Machina. Ooh.
I don't know, because I think the ending to Ex Machina, I'm going off a massive tangent here, I think the one to Ex Machina really serves the film well, in like a thematic sense. But I think the twist got me more in The Visit, actually.
Yeah, my heart...
Like, that was a complete, just my stomach just sank, my heart dropped, my jaw hit the ground. So, it's a weird one. But yeah, I know what you mean, Tate, like, and even with Force Awakens, I'm sort of at the stage now, 19 TV spots in, sort of 4 or 5 trailers have been released, and all the leaked images and stuff. I feel like I've seen half of this movie already. And then you go back to like the original stars. Have you guys seen the original trailer for A New Hope?
No.
Not
it's
in a
all
long
on YouTube.
time.
You should totally do a reaction.
So, yeah, it's so bad. It makes the film look terrible. It's so slow and boring. It doesn't really show much of the action. It's just this really like crusty old guy doing the voiceover going, somewhere this could be happening right now. And it's so boring. It looks nothing like the film we eventually get. But I agree with that. I think like old films like this, you would have got one trailer, maybe a couple of bits on TV perhaps, and that was it. Now it feels like I've practically seen almost more than half of Force Awakens before I've even seen it.
See, I'm on the opposite of that. I see so many trailers and stuff like Ninja Turtles. I know this is off point, but they just like unveiled all their mutants, Batman v Superman, Doomsday, and to a degree, I know I'm not really watching the TV spots as such, but going into Force Awakens, I can put 2 or 3 lines together. I couldn't put a paragraph together on each act of the film we're going to see. So there's bits and bobs we know, but I was looking at a Phantom Menace trailer yesterday, and it wasn't the first, it was the second one, and the whole trailer is about how Naboo's been taken over, there's going to be a war, the Jedi are there to protect them, there's this boy called Anakin, and even the Phantom Menace one spoils almost everything. It's got Obi-Wan shouting no at the end, so in all honesty you probably could pitch Qui-Gon dying. But I think they've done a great job with Force Awakens, because we haven't really seen anything.
We've got the Daisy Ridley shot of her lying over something and she's crying.
Yeah, but again, we don't know what.
I know, but like saying that, like what you just said about the whole
the no.
See the no. So maybe after the film it becomes slightly more obvious, but we won't know until we see it.
And with that bit where Rey's crying, you can see the background as well. So we know it takes place on that snowy forest section. So we could sort of know which characters are going to be involved in that part.
Or do we? We haven't seen Luke. That's the best kept secret of the year. If there's any dumb person that's gone to watch episode 7 and doesn't think Luke's in it, that's the twist of their life.
Yeah.
But that's
I know that
fault.
leaked image came out of Luke already, and whoever posted that, I hate you for the rest of my life. Like, if I hadn't have seen that, it would be immense. Now I know what Luke looks like, but the actual reveal of him and when it's going to happen in the film, that's definitely going to be one to watch. So we're coming up to about 50 minutes now. Any negatives from you guys on the film, and then we'll close out with sort of our overall recommendation of what we think of it.
It's only a negative because of what I've seen in previous other films beforehand and what I've seen what they can do afterwards. But lightsabers and the lightsaber fight in this film was pretty awful. I'm sorry, but simply putting it, they did it better in all of the other films since. Not only that, but there have been very good films with sword fights beforehand, so they could have done the choreography for it. They could have somehow managed to do something, because initially they didn't CGI anything other than a stick. So they could have done a better set sequence with that. That's my only kind of downside to the film.
Yeah, I think the lightsaber battle it's alright. It's got the iconic shot of them crossing blades, but the way I always saw it, I don't like the fact they haven't actually remastered the lightsabers after all these years. I still think they should do. The problem is that when he wrote it, he said these lightsabers, they weigh like 40-50 pounds and they're heavy, they're warrior weapons. Is that okay? But again, it's two old blokes fighting, so especially.
So
in
wouldn't
comparison.
it be easier for just some young kid to make a lighter lightsaber and just completely destroy everyone because of their slow reactions?
Exactly. I think they kind of went off it. They upped the stakes with 5. Episode 6, you've got one of the best duels, and the prequels. I'm sorry, they're not brilliant. The prequels,
but the duels
lightsaber
are good.
duels are unreal, to a degree. Even the Attack of the Clones ones, where you have an 800-year-old wielding a lightsaber with ease. But yeah, no, I get what you mean totally. I love the moment of Obi-Wan dying. I think that's great.
And that
I like the fact
iconic
that
line, "If you strike me down." Yeah, go on then.
The ultimate line to
That's
say
one of
on
my
the
most
internet.
quoted.
I say it to everyone on PlayStation, Twitter, and I always win on Battlefront, so it doesn't matter anyway.
And this film, like all the Star Wars films, this is just so quotable, like all the way through. Like even in day-to-day life, there's loads of quotes I use all the time. I find your lack of faith disturbing is one of mine. You'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Like anywhere I go to, like if it's on a night out or something, I always say that.
Swindon.
You must be cautious.
Swindon.
games.
Full stop.
Football games. Always quote it in a away game.
But just going quickly back to the lightsaber fight. Choreography wise, it definitely hasn't aged well, but I think what you should focus on more is sort of like the interaction between the two characters, about former master and student, and I think that's what that fight's more about. I know you were saying about like the heavy lightsabers and the heavy, like sort of old school knights and swords. I way prefer the fights more like that, and I've seen interviews with JJ, Adam Driver, and John Boyega at these press conferences, and they're saying that that the lightsaber fights are going to be like the old style. They're going to have like the flair of the new ones, but in terms of actual combat, it's going to be very sort of like hard hitting like the originals were. I prefer those kind of fights. I think what's lacking in A New Hope in terms of that scene is the lack of music, because there is no music behind that entire fight up until the bit where Obi-Wan sacrifices himself.
I think it works.
And
Yeah.
I think it does work, but I think maybe if it did have some kind of underlying music, it may make it a bit more energetic or a bit more exciting. And Tate, did you say about sort of the lightsabers that were just sticks?
Yeah.
In the original version, and because of the despecialized editions, they make it 100% accurate to what the original versions were like.
Okay.
There's a bit where Obi-Wan's fighting Vader, and the light on the lightsaber cuts out, and you just see him holding a stick, and they've kept that in it. So, but stuff like that I don't mind. I find bits like that charming, especially in this film, because you do see sort of all the trials that George Lucas had to go through to get it made, that it was pushing the envelope with special effects and what they could do. So little inconsistencies here and there I don't really mind as much, because I know it was done with the best of intentions and physically what they were capable of doing at that time of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So I guess we can round out now with your guys' recommendation, sort of how you think it holds up as an introduction to Star Wars, being the first in a trilogy, and sort of how it works as a continuation from the prequels as well.
Oh, I think it's a great introduction to the lore and the world of Star Wars. Everything from the lightsaber duels to Darth Vader to Luke is the journey of the hero. You've got Princess Leia already introduction. You've got this princess who is, yes, she's in peril like traditional, but she's a badass. So I think it's great introducing, and then linking to the prequel wise. In all honesty, I love the little dabbles of there's the Death Star being built, there's Tarkin, there's Ewan McGregor being Alec Guinness in Episode 3. So to a degree, I think it might actually link to the prequels better than IKB 5 and 6. But I just think it's great what it is, and as an introduction to the world, everything it did, I can't thank the film enough.
Yeah, and it basically introduced me into cinema.
Same.
And it is magical for so many people out there in the world, and especially just to show how well this film holds up. They're making the 7th sequel this year, and they're releasing it, and we're already talking about it breaking box office records. So obviously it had to have a good grounding to start off with, and this film was just perfect for that grounding.
Yeah.
And we didn't speak about merchandise, which we won't, but that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, still going strong, even in the, what was it, like the 10-year lapse between episode 3 and this new one coming out. Toys were still going strong, people were still talking about Star Wars, and I think that's one of the things about Star Wars, that it's everlasting between generations. But this one, I think it's a fantastic introduction. It's such an amazing first act because it introduces you to all these new characters, this brand new world, immediately immerses you in it because it's new yet similar. It feels sort of like old, it feels worn, and the characters are just iconic. They're sort of archetypes of old fairy tales and stories, but they're done in a new way. One of the best villains of all time, well, without question, he is the best villain of all time in Darth Vader. The characters are just memorable, brilliant, and just seeing them change as the films go on is fantastic, which obviously culminates more with Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But more importantly, although this is sort of like a very simple film compared to the other two, I just appreciate what George Lucas, what his entire production crew did for this film. When they were on set and they didn't think it would work, they thought it was going to flop, but they carried on, and you look at the result and it is without question of a doubt the most lasting franchise, I would say, of all time. But so yeah, that will do it for our review of Star Wars A New Hope. Be sure to rate, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought of this film, what you think of the originals or just Star Wars in general. You can find us at Facebook at facebook.com/cinemasavvy, on Twitter at cinema_savvy, and at Letterboxd at cinema_savvy as well. So let's start talking Star Wars. We've got the final 2 films to talk about. We'll have our top 10 of our favourite Star Wars moments, and we're almost there, lads. Few days and we will be sitting in the cinema for a brand new Star Wars movie.
I am ready.
I still can't I still can't admit that this is happening, but it's fantastic. Can't wait. So yeah, that will do it for our review of A New Hope. Be sure to come back next time.